All right, and here we are. We have Emmy, who is going to be running Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets Glitchless for the PC. Emmy, take it away.
Alright, so as Conception said, this is Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets Glitchless. The timing's gonna start when I skip the first cutscene, so I don't think there's anything I have to lead it off with. You've seen HP2 before this marathon, so I'll count it down, and that's when timing will start. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. Alright, so like I said, HP2 was at this marathon yesterday, and Liam of Complex Beaver probably showed it off. And the main difference that Glitchless has from 90% is that you play a lot more of the game. You skip a lot of levels once you unlock Quidditch Warping. You skip Goyle, you skip Diffindo, you skip Slytherin. And in Glitchless, you play those levels because you can't Quidditch Warp, you can't Brightness Boost, and maybe I should talk about what was a glitch, because this is going to start to look a little bit glitchy. In Glitchless, we ban things that are bigger glitches, kind of. A lot of people like to think of it as a glitch-less category because of that. So some people would be like, well, you just went out of bounds, but Harry Potter 2 Glitchless says you won't. So several times in the run I'm going to be like, this isn't a glitch, and you're going to think it's a glitch, but it's not, trust me. But the main things that are banned are brightness boosting, which Liam showed off, Quidditch Warping, wall walks, spell tech, which is closing your menu to reset your cast cooldown, because normally it takes Harry 1 second between casts to cast spells in succession. And other stuff like that. But the sort of things that are banned, or are allowed, are things like skipping triggers, jumping around objects, moving through levels in unintended ways, even if they cause pretty sizable skips. So you're going to see that particularly in Spongify when we skip about half of the level because they let us. And the first major difference, of course I didn't boost anyway, any place on the way here, but the first difference that's going to diverge from Liam's run is that we are going to not do the arrow keys here. It's faster to do the arrow keys, so you might be confused why I'm not going to do it, but doing the arrow keys gives you house points. The first round gives you 5, second 10, third 15, and that's 30 house points, which later, after this level, is going to be converted into time in the Bean bonus room. In any percent and 100%, in every category that isn't glitchless, you can skip getting house points at the end of Rictus Emperor, so that means that the house points you gain here basically don't matter. But in Glitchless, every house point before the first Bean bonus room counts, and you have to minimize that because they translate essentially every house point to 1 second. Essentially. There's a bit of math going on there. And it's also dependent on a random value that Slytherin gets at the start of the game. Normally, in runs, you will check this and reset if it's not good, but I'm in a marathon, so I could lose anywhere from 0 to about 40 seconds based on house point RNG at the end of Rictus Emperor.
En gång till.
And all that time is going to be spent standing in the bean bonus room doing nothing, so
Okej, Harry.
it's not
Jag
going to
tror
be
att du har gjort
ideal.
tillräckligt.
Now, unlike in any percent, I can't use spell tech to make, or pause tech to make my spells go faster. So in Glitchless, you have to be very careful about when you cast spells, because, like I said earlier, it takes almost exactly 1 second for Harry's spell or casting ability to recharge. And each second matters. You can't have extra hits, because every extra hit is going to lose you a lot of time. So you have to optimize your angles, your positioning, and everything like that in order to get everything into these crab hits and stuff like them, and the least amount of hits that you can. And that's one of the things that makes Glitchless fundamentally really different from any percent. Because in any percent, an extra hit is you open up your menu and you close it and you press the left mouse button, essentially. But in Glitchless, that's a whole other second. So what I'm trying to do here is a little skip where you jump backwards and grab the ledge here. Normally, you're supposed to put a crab into one of those holes there, and it lowers the staircase to let you go by, but I don't have time for that. So instead, I jumped around it and did a ledge grab, which, of course, is not a glitch. Next part up here is the chasm. In any percent, this chasm is boosted up right here, and it skips a pretty significant part of the next couple of rooms. But in Glitchless, we have to go around, and that involves hitting the crab and going through this door, which I believe is the hardest part of any Glitchless run. As you see, I just failed it. It is the secret final boss of Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. And coming up here is a big example of why casting and not having casting tech makes it really hard to play HP2 Glitchless, because that might have looked relatively simple right there, but it is actually extremely hard to get those in with only a single flipindo, because you have to angle your spells, like you may have seen me doing, where I'm pulling my mouse down as I'm casting, and you also have to have really solid timing to make sure you stun the crabs with Rift Descent from midair, and also hit them before they begin falling, because otherwise you're going to need to hit them each twice, and that is a crab house, and I need to fall down. Crabs in this game don't like falling off of geometry, and sometimes if you hit them too close to an edge, they will start going in a, what some people like to call a HAS or a CVL, where the crab's velocity stays constant instead of, falling, so they'll continue moving in a direction, which makes them typically miss targets like that, and it can be a really big pain. But it can be abused later in the run. So it's not something I do, but a lot of runners, who especially do glitches, abuse it. So coming up here, we'll see what my house point RNG was for Slytherin, and it was 76, which is actually the best possible RNG I could have gotten. I'll chalk it up to Marathon though. So like I said, you can lose up to like 40 seconds here. Slytherin gets a random value from 40 to 80. And the time that Harry spends in the Beans bonus room is based on how many more points Gryffindor has compared to Slytherin, and that's in chunks of 5. So if Gryffindor has 5 more points than Gryffindor, or Gryffindor has 5 more points than Slytherin, you're going to spend 10 seconds in there. If they have 10 more points, you're going to spend an extra 10 seconds. And for every 5 points after that, you'll spend 5 more seconds. Which is why it's really important when you're grinding for Glitchless to reset until Slytherin has between 76 and 73 house points. Sometimes 77 through 80 are fine, but they have a 50% chance to either be good or be second best. So it's to go for 76 between 73. And the amount of house points Gryffindor has is relatively constant. It can fluctuate by 1 or 2 points based on how fast you do Rick December, but it's typically about 77 or 78.
Can I slide in with one quick donation?
Sure, go ahead.
We have $5 from Rillabelle saying thwack.
I believe that puts us over our next $100 donation goal then, doesn't it?
That's right. The ultimate marathon goal that we made, that kind of our stretch goal now that you obviously have tripled our original goal, is $750. If you hit $750, I might pass out. So if you want that to happen, which I guess I do, so keep getting those donations in.
You pass out on stream? That's good content. We should hit it.
There's only the best content here at the Trans Rights Are Match.
Now you saw there, when I grabbed the ingredients, that I waited for a second. Liam explained this in his run, but if you hit the cauldron before Snape starts talking, 2 cutscenes try to play at the same time, or 2 bits of dialogue do, and Harry gets stuck, and the game soft locks. So despite this being a speedrun, you have to go slow for a moment in your life to go fast in the end. It's a pretty impactful and poignant message. Alright, so we're heading to the second spell challenge of the game here, and that is Scourge. And in the first spell challenge, I didn't do the arrow keys because I couldn't take the extra house points, and it would cost me way too much time. But now that we've gotten past the first spell challenge, and we're into the second, Slytherin is always going to be beating Gryffindor. Gryffindor is scripted to win the first time, but past now, Slytherin easily trounces Gryffindor if we don't grab challenge stars and stuff like that. So it's faster now to actually do the arrow keys, and like Liam said, there is a chance that the game misregisters an input. It typically happens in the 3rd set of arrow keys right here, but it can happen in some other places, and that will mean that the round will fail. So I'm just gonna hope that doesn't happen, because it loses, on English it loses 18 seconds, but I'm not sure about Norwegian, which I didn't say, but we play the game in Norwegian as of a couple months ago. It's faster than English, and we got our hands on it.
Bra Harry, du har gått vidare till nästa nivå av lektionen.
And there's actually some slight strategies to how fake inputs work. If you get a fake input on your first round through, it's actually faster to lose all of the set-throughs like you do in Rick December. But if you get past the first round, you want to just keep going. Unless you get a second fake input twice in a row, and then you lose. Unless you're on the 3rd round. There's a lot of if-elses in the fake input hierarchy. If you want to ignore all that, just don't get fake inputs. It's really easy. Just convince the game to not give them to you. So like I said, the biggest difference between Glitchless and 80% is we're actually going to play this level, which is a wild idea in my opinion. What Scourge is about is there's a star at the bottom and you start at the top, so you have to go down, but you can't jump down because obviously that would hurt or something. So you have to walk through looping hallways, and you're always going over the same central location. Or at least thematically, that's what Scourge is. Scourge, in actuality, is about, it's about mostly snails and moving platforms. Right there is where we're gonna retread the same ground. Is that kind of looks like a glitch to the untrained eye, but to the trained eye who knows better, that's actually not a glitch. Someone said so. The reasoning behind it is movers in this game, which are things that nominally will move, have different settings applied to them and have different behavior that functions differently. For some reason, most movers in this game won't do something like that, where they'll just stop if Harry interacts with him, but that one was specifically set to do that. And it's not a problem with the programming of the game, it's more of an issue with the design of the levels, which is more or less often how we discern whether something is a glitch or if it's what we would call an exploit. So that is an exploit because it's a problem with the level. Where that methodology doesn't really stand up to scrutiny is this whole run I've been holding 2 directional keys for every direction in which I move. So right now when I'm moving forward, I'm holding W and Shift. Technically I don't have to hold it the first time, just when I start accelerating. But the way that holding multiple inputs works in HP2 is while Harry's accelerating from a stop, such as from standstill or from a ledge grab, he doesn't immediately start at maximum velocity. Obviously, you don't do that IRL either. He speeds up, starting from 0 and quickly moving to maximum velocity. But the speed at which he goes there is dependent on some things. And one of those things is the amount of arrow keys you're pressing. Each forward directional key you press adds to that acceleration every tick. So it's about twice as fast to accelerate with 2 inputs than it is with a single one. And the reason we don't do more than 2 is because you can only assign 2 keys to any movement in the game. There's actually a tech in the game where you can assign, or rather not assign, but you play the game with a controller, with a normal Xbox or direct input controller. And the game will actually natively recognize that as input. And an interesting fact about the controller is if you... Oh, it didn't go in. If you're holding forward on the controller, your character will instantly accelerate, or well, as instantly as you'll hold forward to full velocity. And some people have proposed using this as a method of speeding up, but right now, unfortunately, I'm not playing Harry Potter 2 with both of my hands and my feet. But someday, sometime in the future, it is theoretically possible to place a GameCube controller at your feet, hold it forward, and get slightly better acceleration. What I'm going to be doing right here is a trick called Better Than Dry Storage 3. Normally you're supposed to flip, Better Than Dry Storage Flat 5. Normally what you're supposed to do is flip the panels in that maze up top and navigate your way around. But what you can do is go down there and just at the peak of your jump, as you saw me do there, you can actually cast at the switch and move it while you're down there, which normally, if it's in that state, you wouldn't be able to progress, but since you've already progressed halfway through and gone past the place where it's blocking, you're actually fine. So that's a little tiny skip, compared to setting it up like people normally would do. It only saves about half of a second. And the hardest thing about controller is the fact that if you point your controller to the side, instead of moving Harry sideways, it moves your camera, so you have to be very specific with how much you tilt the controller. You have to move it basically directly forward, otherwise you're going to be messing with your camera and all your tricks are going to be messed up. So it's a really high risk, low reward sort of strat, which is basically what Glitchless is built on. Glitchless doesn't have a lot of huge skips, and instead relies on a lot of micro time saves and movement finessing, compared to any percent where every other room you're brightness boosting or you're Quidditch warping. Glitchless is more about fine platforming and being consistent in your platforming. Of course, that's an element to any percent. Alright, so it's time to duel Malfoy, and he deflected my first spell, which he's not supposed to do, because that means I have to hit him again. But there's a strat where you can get a really quick kill, like I was attempting to do, where you hit Malfoy really early, and then you hit him right as he begins to move. Other runners will hit him as he begins to move, and then hit him on the way back. There's very little time difference between it, but the way that just happened for me when Malfoy deflects it is slower, obviously. Alright, now we're going to be learning Diffindo, which is the third out of 4 spells that Harry learns at this year at Hogwarts.
Då så, Mr. Potter, fixera blicken på symbolen framför dig.
An interesting thing about this arrow key challenge is that a lot of runners, especially back several years ago, simply would not do these arrow keys and would either take a break or just sit around, because in English, not doing these arrow keys loses you about 1 second, which isn't that much, to be fair. And there is a small chance that you can get a fake input on Diffindo. For some reason, different arrow key challenges have different rates of having fake inputs. Scourge is the most common, Rictus Semper is the second most common, and after that Diffindo is really not common, and Spongify has happened like 3 times ever, but it has happened, so we know it can happen. And we still aren't sure why. We got a prototype of the game with a lot of the in-progress code, but this part of the game wasn't finished. So, as it is, we still have no idea why we get fake inputs, unless we found out and no one told me, which I don't think is the case. So we just kind of have to deal with it. Alright, so in Diffindo, most of the level operates on what is known as a global cycle, which means that somewhere really late in the level, some snails are moving, and we rely on them being in a certain part of their movement once we get to them. That ends up meaning that I have about 5 to 6 seconds to lose in this level, and I'll still be basically on the same time. I'd say 4 or 5, not 5 to 6. Which means that we can use that time to take detours to grab frogs. Like you saw, I knocked over a cauldron. Depending on your health, there's a chance instead of dropping a bean, it'll drop a frog. And I grabbed a frog there. Because there are some tricks later in the run that rely on health. Right there, you just saw me do a trick where I jumped before a cutscene started, because once a cutscene starts, Harry's vertical velocity is set to 0, so it lets me drop much quicker than just walking off. But yeah, especially in the next level, we have some tricks that rely on health, and it's good to have our health up. Especially since we're given the free time, we might as well take it, right? And just for prosperity's sake, there is a proposed trick that would save about a minute in this next upcoming room, where you lure a pixie. Oh, I did not hit that. lure a pixie, this pixie in fact, and ride it out of the hole in the here. Out of, well, not out of bounds, because out of bounds is banned, but out of bounds in quotation marks is not banned. And just skip the remainder of the level. But I don't think anyone's ever done it. It's theoretically possible, but no one's ever done it. But that does mean there's a minute of time to saving Glitchless, so it can still go on. Alright, so coming up on my left is going to be the snail that I'm supposed to be doing this global cycle thing about. Yeah, you can see it on screen right now. It's the furthest right snail. And we hit it rather early. So we actually get to go cast at that and sit around waiting for it to charge us. Which it did right there. It's going to walk its way into the snail pit, start the cutscene like that. And then we just have to knock this snail into there as well. And we can move on. Yep. I kind of wish I was timing this run right now, because it's been going really well. Up here is an example of a moving platform boost. In the real world, if you jump off a moving object, you'll be jumping as if you had the momentum of that moving object added to your jump. The unrealistic thing about Harry Potter is that you can quickly be brought up to speed because of a moving object. So it's dubious physics, but not for the platform boost part, just for the getting up to speed part. But it does let us go fast. As we come up on the end of this level, we have some snails that we have to hit into these holes. And this is an area in the game where you'll definitely notice the lack of pause tap, because as you can see, I have to painfully wait 1 second between every single cast, where in any percent, those snails would just fly straight into the places they belong. And it also means we have to plan our movements on those snails a little more delicately. Coming up is one of the more interesting strats in Glitchless. It's a really complex skip that only saves up to maybe 5 to 8 seconds if executed perfectly. We're going to be setting some mushrooms that you saw in the earlier level on top of each other, because they have a physical hitbox, and we're going to be climbing them to skip a small part of the level. The annoying thing is that you can only ever drop mushrooms when you're hurt. When you take damage, or, well, actually, or when you grab a ledge. Over here, I'm going to be stepping on this mushroom to skip a large part of the level. And coming up, we have to stack 3 mushrooms on top of each other in order to skip this part. So we have to leave one of these mushrooms alive, take damage from its smoke, and drop them. Like that. Oh, that was a bit early. As you can see, I position it like that. And then the final one we have to jump into like that to drop. And just like that, we've skipped about, I'd say, 3 seconds. Normally you just go around and climb up, but if you do it fast like that, you set some mushrooms down, you lose a tiny bit of health, because mushrooms do very little damage to Harry, but they definitely do a bit. And you climb them. You also have to be delicate there, because if you run into a mushroom, you'll pick it up, and you don't want to do that while you're climbing them, because then you'll have to reset it up. So yeah. And coming up is the biggest skip in the game, which I'm kind of nervous about, because I only practiced it once today. It's relatively easy, and you saw Liam do it in his any percent run, and it's called Dumbledore Skip, or Nick Skip. And we're just going to be jumping around a trigger on these staircase, up here. Like that. There is a 2.5 to 3 minute unskippable cutscene, or cutscene sequence. There's a little bit of gameplay, but it's mostly unskippable cutscenes that you have to do if you hit that cutscene. But the cutscene that's supposed to play after that, or the segment of gameplay, is already here, and we can just walk up to it without getting down below. And now that we've progressed past that game state, the cutscene trigger is deactivated, but Nearly Headless Nick's floating petrified body is not. Normally the cutscene will remove Nick's body and it won't be there, but because we've skipped it, it's going to be there for the rest of the game, no matter what we do. But it's not a problem because we don't have to interact with it or go in that area of the map. But it's a nice little Easter egg that you can see. Now, if you can speak Swedish or Norwegian and also can watch cutscenes that I've skipped, which you probably can't, admittedly, then you would know that a majority of this game is spent trying to make Polyjuice Potion, to interrogate Draco Malfoy and find out if he is the heir of Slytherin. And this is the final ingredient that we need. The first ingredient was the bicorn horn that we got in the dungeons. The second was the boomslang skin that we just got in the greenhouses. And the final one is a bit of the target's DNA, specifically that of Goyle's, which we have to get in the gardens, which is this level right here. And once we get that, we'll be able to mix a Polyjuice Potion that let us pretend to be the Goyle and trick Malfoy into telling us that he's actually the heir of Slytherin, which he totally is, and this won't be a huge waste of time. I swear. Well, no spoilers, right? This is your first time seeing the story. For a level about in the gardens, this level doesn't have much gardening, I have to say. There's a lot of dreary dungeons. Some minor little note about my movement is that you'll notice when I can avoid it, I typically will not be jumping. And that is because Harry moves slightly faster when on the ground compared to when in air. You can make this much less of a big deal if you spam the cast button and get into that animation when you're midair, which you will see me doing every time I am midair, spamming my left mouse button, which is the cast button. But it still, in general, is just slightly faster to maintain on the ground. So, in a lot of parts, I'll do that instead of jumping. Alright, so we've plucked a hair off of a sleeping Goyle, and we're going to go back to Moaning Myrtle's bathroom, and we're going to mix up a Polyjuice Potion. Now, in the movies and books, everyone gets transformed into something. Hermione, unfortunately, plucks a cat hair and gets transformed into a cat, but Harry and Ron get Crabbe and Goyle. Instead, just Harry's going to be Goyle, and he's sent in to do the mission alone. Oh well. I guess thus is the luck of being the boy who lived. And here's going to be the second part of the luck, or the run, where we expend some of our health in order to save a little bit of time. This is going to lose most of our health, but it is going to be mostly fine. Oh, I jumped a bit early there, so I had to land on that lamppost instead. As you saw right there, instead of going around, you're supposed to go anti-clockwise down the stairs. You can just jump and eat a hit and save about 3 to 5 seconds. I'd say 3 there, because I messed up the first jump and got stuck on the stairs. And you might be wondering why I just walked around the railings there to jump down where the stairs were, and that's because for some reason they decided to put invisible walls on those railings. That's not something they put in a lot of the game. This game is very, very liberal when it comes to putting up invisible walls. well, ones that the player can interact with at least.
Rent blod.
And that's one of the most egregious examples
Jag kan säkert använda det
of
för
things
att
they decided to do. It is very likely that they did that in order to prevent sequence breaks, because there are a lot of cutscenes that happen on those railings. Alright, here's another level that was skipped by the any percent run, and this is the Slytherin common room. In this level, we're navigating to the end of the common room, which is very precarious and doesn't seem very much like a dormitory to me, to go speak with Draco Malfoy. Now, unfortunately, when we go through the door here, a very mean Slytherin is going to knock out this bridge, and we're normally supposed to go up and have to drop some slime onto it. I jumped a little late there. But if you just fast enough and you jump on just the right spot, like that, you can just barely avoid the bridge collapsing. Normally what you're supposed to do is dump ectoplasm on it, and when you hit that button, instead of immediately falling, it sticks like it was initially. But instead of that, we simply skip it. Alright, finally we're into the dormitory section of the dormitory. The Gryffindor common room doesn't have a platforming puzzle to get to it, but I guess that is just how the Slytherins roll, right? Right here I'm going to be zigzagging through some columns because it's slightly faster to go there through them than around them, and we're going to be encountering Malfoy. Interestingly, you have to go at a little bit of a diagonal here to hit the cutscene ideally. And we just skipped the cutscene where he tells us, hey, I'm not the heir of Slytherin, and we're like, okay, we gotta get out. But our Polyjuice potion ran out. So now we have to avoid all the Slytherins in the Slytherin common room, so they don't see us. Well, just kidding. We lose if they touch us. So even though they see Harry Potter from a foot away from them in the common room, as long as we get to this doorway, no harm done, right? Apparently, in earlier builds of this game, they planned for it to be much more of a stealth mission where getting seen would be a lose condition, but that was too difficult, or it was too difficult to play, so they just made a tag instead. Hello, Nick. He is still petrified, and no one has seemed to find him yet. And it's time to learn the fourth and final spell of the game, Spongify, also one of the coolest.
Koncentrera dig på symbolen framför dig.
A little fun fact for anyone who's extra observant about these games.
Trollstaven som dyker upp
Most
framför dig
of the
kommer
arrow
att vara
keys in this
cellform.
game have
När
4
trollstaven är placerad
sections
precis över
of
pilen,
arrow keys,
trycker du på motsvarande
and Spongify is the only one that has 3.
Den här övningen
To
består av 3
make
delar.
up for that,
I varje del måste du träffa
Spongify
alla spetsar i rätt ordning för att
adds
få fortsätta.
extra arrow keys to
Roll
these
it.
groups.
Kör!
Normally, in the first 3 challenges, they add 1 arrow key in the second round and 2 arrow keys in the final round to each group. But instead in Spongify, they add 2 to each, which seems to be balancing for the fact
Bra, Harry.
that this one
Du har gått
only
vidare
has
till nästa
3
rond.
groups.
5 poäng till Gryffindor. Rond 2, kör!
That is a fact that I've mentioned to several Harry Potter 2 speedrunners, and the most common reaction I've gotten is, oh, I didn't even realize that, because I guess people aren't paying too much attention to the very difficult and taxing challenge that is
Bra, Harry.
hitting
Du har gått vidare till
your
nästa
arrow
rond.
keys in
10
time
poäng
with the
till
game.
Gryffindor. Rond 3, kör!
Personally, I think it's the most difficult and taxing part of the run, but I can understand why some people would think Quidditch is that.
Härligt, grabben. Du har klarat alla övningarna.
Alright.
15 poäng
So I said at the beginning of this run that the difference between any percent and glitchless is that in glitchless we play the levels, and in any percent you skip them. But that's not necessarily true. In Spongify, we skip about half of the level because it was designed pretty poorly. Normally you would be done right about now with Spongify in a any percent run through of the level, but we have to play about half of the level before we get to skip it all. Which is a fair price to pay for playing the most enjoyable category. And I was not supposed to do that. Alright, up here is decanter jump. We jump on a decanter, we cast a spell, and we skip a cutscene. It is my favorite skip in the game. Alright, so coming up is going to be when we skip half levels. Like Scourge, but unlike Scourge, stars at the top of the level, and we start at the bottom. And normally you're supposed to go around over there, but if you just hold left, you get a ledge grab, and you go to about 2 minutes later in the level.
Är du intresserad av ett byte?
So, good game design, folks. As you can see, Slytherin is currently beating Gryffindor by about 400 house points. They should have no problem defeating Gryffindor when it comes to the house point ceremony at the end of the year. This is foreshadowing.
Är du intresserad av ett byte?
So, what Ron has come to inform us is that Hagrid, I lied, there was no Hagrid, that a book was found in the library, or in Moaning Mortal's bathroom, and there's a big flood. And we have to go check it out. And Harry's gonna pick it up, and it's gonna absorb him, and the ghost of Tom Riddle is gonna be like, hey, Hagrid's a bad guy. We're gonna be like, oh dang, Hagrid is the heir of Slytherin, or something. As you can see, Moaning Mortal flooded the bathroom, and there is the diary of Tom Riddle.
Harry förtrollades av minnena som Tom Dolder visade.
Over there we have Tom Riddle, and right here we have a much shorter Hagrid.
Kom ut. Så ja. God kväll, Rubius. Vad gör du här nere, Tom?
Det är över. Jag tror inte att du menade att döda någon, men monster
So
är
this
inga
is
bra
Hagrid.
husdjur.
Den har aldrig dödat någon.
Kom nu. Det minsta Hogwarts
If you don't speak this language, which I wouldn't blame you for not doing,
Det var inte han.
Riddle
Han
is
skulle
currently
aldrig... Det är inte han.
accusing Hagrid
Gå åt
of
sidan.
having a beast, which he totally doesn't. Oh, well, okay, well he does, but this isn't one of the bad beasts. It's just a spider, you know? And this actually ends up in being the reason that Hagrid gets expelled from Hogwarts. At age 13, I believe, or maybe 14. It was his 3rd year. And now, since we saw that, Harry and Ron discussed it, and they've decided, okay, we gotta go see Hagrid. We gotta talk to him about this, because under our impression, we still think that the, Aragog, the spider, is the monster from the Chamber of Secrets that is killing everybody and donating, and donating them. I just saw someone post the link. Yeah, please remember to donate. This is a charity marathon for Trans Lifeline. But yeah, we're gonna go talk with Hagrid, but instead of being able to do that, we're too late, and Lucius Malfoy comes to send him packing to Azkaban. So he left some hints because he saw us come by, and he's like, hey, you should go in the forest. So we decided that we should listen to Hagrid, a very smart thing to do, and we should go into the Forbidden Forest, which we do, and that is where we are right now. And our goal is to find Aragog and find out what happened. Right here, you're going to see I did a weird jump, and that is because the bridge collapses if you stop on the center of it. But if you jump around it, it doesn't. which is fortunate for us because we can jump around it. Coming up is the Aragog boss fight, where it turns out Aragog is actually a bad guy. Despite not being the bad guy, he is a bad guy. So he's going to try to kill us, which is unfortunate. Then we're going to do something that is totally not a glitch, which is hitting the webs multiple times. Normally you have to hit all of the webs supporting Aragog before you can go into the second phase of the fight. But if instead, if you cast out the web and hit it twice right before it disappears like that, it'll count as hitting 2 webs. Which is not a glitch, question mark. This is going to be quite live, by the way. Alright, well, we've defeated Aragog. He's going to fall into this pit, and we're going to be rescued by Ron and the Fort Ango. I should say the reason why that fight is so loud is because this game has 2 volume sliders which determine the sound of different things of the game. There's a music slider and there's a sound slider. Obviously the music impacts the music and the sound impacts everything else. Kind of. Some sounds of the game, such as Aragog, Peeves, some of the Lumos sounds, and others, don't actually have a set volume slider. So if you lower your sliders to, say, as mine are right now, like both about 40, then it's going to play at 100%, which is going to be much louder than everything else. Which is just a little beautiful mistake for old time's sake. Up here we have another thing which is very much not a glitch TM, and it's going to be me casting through the ground. It's magic, after all, and hitting a scourge through the floor, if I can manage it. Just like that. The spell isn't clipping or anything. We know a lot about this game, and the hitbox of the scourge is simply just barely sticking out. Coming over here, we have a skip known as, I messed up the logic right there, a skip known as Crusher Skip, where we jump over this gap over here, which is very difficult, and going above, which loses a couple seconds, we go around over this. And coming up is another interesting skip called Pixie Proxy. We have... Alright. So what we did right there was we stunned a pixie so it got stuck in place, and we ricocheted off of it with a Spongify tile. Because they have cylindrical hitboxes, and so if you hit it at the right angle, you'll go to the center platform, and you can skip most of that room. Which is, as I should say, is the catchphrase of this run, not a glitch. TM. Alright, coming up is another thing from the not glitch category of glitches, I mean exploits. We're going to be getting something that looks a lot like a wall walk, but isn't. Now, if you can explain to me why that's not a wall walk, you want a cookie. There's secretly some collision down there, which makes it not a wall walk, because we understand how wall walks work in this engine. It's texture seams on walls, and there's actually a mover collision box there, so it's different. Somehow. Yes, not a glitch TM. Alright, so coming up is the last level of the game. Yeah, no, keep an eye on me. The most insidious glitch in this game is Spongify storage, where if you grab a ledge after hitting a Spongify tile, you are glitching, so don't do that. No, I'll get hurt now. Alright, so here's the final fight in the game. We kill a basilisk with sword lasers, which is just how it went down in the book if you didn't read it. Now, something that isn't a glitch, and is totally an intended feature in this game, is if you hit a pile of sludge, or, well, take any damage, during the cooldown phase of having shot your sword, you will shoot again. I probably should have went to the other grade, but it's just an intentional foresight. So as you see there, I didn't have to charge up a second spell, and instead just shot out another one, which, I don't know, seems a lot like a glitch to me, but it's kind of hard to avoid, so I get it. Alright, so time is coming up when I fade out heading into the Great Hall. Alright, time.
Hör upp! Elever, hör upp! Rektorn vill säga några ord till er.
Alright.
Tyst.
So that's the run.
Det är faktiskt inte för sent att förlora
This cutscene is the end of the game, where Dumbledore is going to tell everyone who won the House Cup, which is it's Slytherin. Slytherin run by several hundred house points. I'm just kidding. Gryffindor won because they're Gryffindor, of course.
Utan omständigheter ska jag nu överlämna pokalen till det elevhem på Hogwarts som har flest poäng.
Tror att vi tar hem den i år igen?
När du och Harry räddade Hogwarts. Det tror jag nog.
Puff.
Anyways, that's Harry Potter 2 Glitchless. Thanks for watching the run. That was a pretty good run through. Yeah.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you so much, Emmy, for the awesome run of Chamber of Secrets Glitchless. Excellent showing there. We're going to throw to an intermission before we get set up for our next run, which is